Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's episode number 64 of the Audible Farm Podcast. And this week's episode is brought to you by Couchtown Coffee. Couchtown Coffee is located right here in Iowa. They roast coffee beans, and then you can buy them from them. They'll ship them to your house. Yeah, that's right. Coffee beans shipped to your house. You don't even have to go to the store for coffee anymore, let alone go to one of those big box companies and have them brew it for you and pay a gazillion dollars every single morning. The best part about this, you can buy the coffee. They'll ship it to your house. It's roasted right here in Iowa by somebody from right here in Iowa that also supports music. And the coolest thing I think Couchtown does is they offer 20% off. And that's only if you listen to this podcast. And, well, here you go. This week's 20% off code is HipKnosis. HipKnosis. The spelling is down below in the description section. If you want to see the spelling, you can save 20% on your order this week. The coolest part about this 20% off thing is Andrew at Couchtown Coffee does this out of the goodness of his heart, and I don't even get any of that 20%. We just made a nice agreement to say, hey, you know what? You support local music, I support local music. The people listening to this obviously loves local music, and let's give them something to look forward to at the end of the day, or the beginning of the day, depending on when you listen and when you enjoy your coffee. So check it out. Go to www.couchtowncoffee.com. Find a coffee you like, send it in order, and make sure you mention HipKnosis. The code is good this week. That would be December 5th through the 11th, and it's good for those 7 days. So make sure you hop on it and check it out. It's delicious coffee. I drink it every day, not just because they sponsor the podcast. I actually really like it. It was one of my big fears when I started the partnership with them that, I said, hey, you guys want to help me out with the podcast, do a little sponsorship, and I'll talk about your coffee. And, oh, yeah, we'll do that. It worked out really good. Sent me a couple samples of the coffee so I could try it out. It's bomb. It is so good. And that's one reason I've had them on week after week after week after week. The coffee's good. They support local music. You can't beat that. You can't beat it. And, check it out. Save that 20%. Enter the code word HipKnosis. It's good for this week only. Why is the code word HipKnosis? I'll tell you why. Because this week I'm sitting down with the gal that sang for HipKnosis, the band that was based out of I guess it'd be Fort Dodge-ish area. They were based out of Junior's recording studio. It'd be Junior's Motel in the Fort Dodge, Otho-ish area. And they were, they made like 4 albums plus. They had about a 10-year lifespan. The band is amazing. I actually ran into Heather originally. Somebody put me in touch with her. I believe it was the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association kind of pointed me that direction. And she's got her own podcast. How cool is that? It's another person in the Midwest, actually not too far from my hometown, making a podcast. And we discuss all sorts of stuff about that in the upcoming episode. Her podcast and my podcast are slightly similar, but based on formats and how we put it out to the public and exactly what goes on behind the scenes, our podcasts are still quite different. So check it out. It's really, really cool. I've got links down below to everything. We talk about that. We talk about our time in HipKnosis. We discuss the differences and similarities between our podcasts. We just discuss our mutual love of music and how we perceive everything that's going on music-wise. One of the cool things was I have a little mini recording studio at my place, but Heather records her podcast at Junior's Motel, and that's like I said, it's in the Fort Dodge to Otho area, somewhere in there, and that is a amazing recording studio. It's only the second time I've ever been in there. Once was to watch a band record, probably about 10 to 15 years ago, and other than that, the place hasn't changed too much. It's amazing. It's one of those really cool things. It's got a lot of history. Junior's Motel, check it out. It's really cool. If you guys want to do some analog recording and things like that, check it out. I mean, I'll talk more about this in the outro, but check out the episode. It's really cool. I sit down, we talk with Heather Kelly about her podcast, The Indie Music Room. We talk a little bit about HipKnosis. We talk similarities and differences in our stories, and it's a really fun one. I had a great time sitting down, getting to know Heather Kelly. So check this one out. It's really cool. Episode 64 with Heather Kelly.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast. your host, Peter Stockdale.
Sitting down today with Heather Kelly. And Heather, I actually met you as a podcaster, but you're much more than a podcaster. You're a musician as well. And how did you go from one to the next? I mean, I'm sure you're still involved musically.
Oh, where do you want me to start? Let's see.
Start at the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
It's a very good place to start.
Okay, we're going to go back to 4th grade.
All right.
My parents bought my sister violin.
Nice.
She didn't want to play it. They didn't want to waste the money, so they made me play it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was classically trained on violin.
Cool.
Yeah. Most outstanding musician my senior year. Like, I was really good. First chair, first violinist.
Cool.
And then I dropped it. Got married, had the kids, did that thing for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was living in Humboldt, I was going to Our Savior's Lutheran Church, and I ran into a guy named Dan Loden.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You know Dan
I know
Loden.
who Dan is.
So, and he played with that reggae group.
Man, yeah. I mean,
Sundogs or...
you and I have actually, prior to the podcast, you're making me dig stuff up from so far back in my past, I can't even remember it.
Yeah.
So
I think it was the Sundogs. But anyways, I went to church, and he was the bass player in our contemporary church band, and he goes, you know, I've been working with these two guys. I think it'd be really cool if you came over. We could probably put you in the band. And I'm like, from classical, I read music, to having to improvise, I didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
But I walked in, and there was Eric Hovey.
Nice.
Don Sorensen.
Cool.
Dan Loden, myself, and Jeff Foreman was the drummer.
Okay.
So I walked into this, and he actually wrote every piece of music for me because all I could do was read at that time. Mm-hmm. Dan Loden did.
Yep.
And so I'm playing these notes he wrote me, but then I started getting comfortable with kind of going outside of the box, and I said to Eric Hovey one time, how do you do that? How do you play without reading music? And he's like, it's called improvising. And so he kind of was the one that really spent time with me to show me how I can, what keys to play in, and what, he actually got me playing piano. So I play piano as well, but that was all by ear because Eric taught me that stuff.
That's awesome. So
we played quite a few shows, and Eric brought me down to the recording studio, and he go, Eric's a blues guy. I love him to pieces, but he's a blues guy.
I actually have a couple of Eric Hovey CDs that I bought when I was in high school.
Do you really?
15 years ago, somewhere I got them that. So
Blues Farm, Recycled Souls, I don't know. I'm on a bunch of them, but you probably heard me through those too.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so he brought me here to the studio, and he's a blues guy, and he knew that I had potential, but he brought me here, and Kirk was getting done with a heavy metal band.
Okay.
And I walked in, and he goes, well, there she is. And I thought, what does that mean? Well, fast forward 2 conversations later, he knew my parents in high school.
Oh, okay.
So he saw the combination of my parents when I walked in the door, and he's like, oh, God, there she is. But, no, we went down in the bottom room, and I got on the grand piano and barely knew how to play, but I showed him one little lick I had, and that turned into our first song and our first album title, and we've released 4 since. So it just, Kirk and I were a better fit because I'm more of a pop rock girl, and Eric was more bluesy, moody, that kind of music. And I don't have that big voice. I don't have a great voice. I've got a unique voice.
All right. I don't have any voice. I mean, my monotone podcast is about the best I can do as far as even singing at all.
Well, you're in bands as well.
I am. I do background vocals in a punk band. I don't know if that qualifies as singing.
I think it does.
I've done some solo shows and sang, but I also I lean on voice modulators quite a bit to try and correct my horrible singing. So or cover it up if nothing else. It's like putting on nice clothes and makeup and duding yourself up and going out, and it's like, this guy cleans up pretty nice. It's like, yeah.
Until you see him at home.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. Is I've worked in this studio, Junior's Motel, my entire career, and I did work a couple times. Dan Loden had a studio as well, and that was all digital.
Mm-hmm.
But here being all analog, I have not had the privilege to use pitch correction.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to do it right.
Yep.
If it's going to come out, it's got to be right. That's
Yep.
what the people hear. And sure, we add some EQ and stuff on the ends, but it's like when you're in an analog studio, you got to do the work.
Yeah. I mean, you can cover up some stuff with the digital studio, but even then, you still got to be able to. Well, I guess you can cover up quite a bit in the
I
digital
know.
studio and nowadays.
I've seen those Jimmy Fallon things where they have somebody on there that's really bad, and all of a sudden they pitch correct them and they sound great, and I'm like, why couldn't I have done that? It was so much easier.
Oh, I don't know why I'm going to bring this up. It kind of reminds me of the South Park episode where the everybody figures out Randy is Lord, the singer, and he's just like showing him how he just pitch corrects a little bit and a couple EQ adjustments there, and whammo, and it's a Lord album comes out of the computer. But it's
know it.
I don't know, but even then I still feel like you have to be able to do the work because you can't. I mean, if you put it in a guitar sense, you can't really like play 4 notes and then digitize it to make it sound like you're shredding a solo.
That's true.
So you still have to do some of the work, to make it come out that way at least.
But I always felt pressure in a digital studio because they'd be like, "You've got 3 chances. We'll take the best of the 3 and put them together." And I'm like, "No, I want it perfect." I always felt that pressure.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been around both digital and analog studios. Analog much less than digital, but I feel like digital, a lot of it is a time crunch sense where it's just like we're going to play it to a metronome, you just do it over and over and over again. We'll just take the best one that you shot out of that and then go to the next one and just do it over and over and over again, and we'll take the best one from there. Or we'll just clip the best parts out and then seam them all together, and wham, you've got a
Well,
riff.
it makes it easier, especially when you can hit that auto, like when you've done a mix, you can like reset the mix you did.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it a lot easier because, we're like pushing the dials up very slowly and trying to find that sound again. So
Yep.
I think digital has a lot of benefits. I'm not comfortable. I'm old. I'm used to the analog, but
I mean, it's a very unique thing, and it's very cool that it's actually here, located, near Otho, Fort Dodge area.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a cool thing to have as close to my hometown as it was, and to say I've actually been in here and seen a band record in here was another thing that's just really cool.
Yeah.
Plus, there's a lot of history, here in this building, so it's kind of a wild thing. And you do your podcast from here as well.
I do it right in this room we're speaking in.
Oh, no kidding.
Kirk has been very generous to offer this space for me to be able to record my podcast, and then he does his magic, and then we send it to my producer, Bill Grady from FortDodgeMusic.com.
Nice.
And so he does all the post-production. I just I have the fun part. I get to talk to the artist, and everybody else does the stuff, and I just enjoy what I'm doing. And like you, this came about, my podcast came about 7-8 months ago, and we talked about it. Bill started up the my Fort Dodge
It's myFortDodgeRadio.com.
Radio.com. And so we talked about maybe having a show, and we had a meeting one day, and he just said, it'd be cool to have a show. And I thought, I am not in front of an audience anymore, but I still love musicians, and I still love music, and I still want to hear the stories. So I kind of like being behind the scenes now and hearing everybody else's stories.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what it is, especially like from my own point of view. I've been playing music for, I guess, publicly for such a short amount of time, but I enjoy talking about it with people. Maybe I don't want to sell myself short. I do it a lot, just based on instinct, but it's just like, I might not be like the best guitarist, but I love gear. I love talking about gear with people. I love talking about different kinds of music, finding new music, going to shows, seeing bands, because you never know when you're going to go to a show and see a band that you're just like, holy cow, where have you guys been? This whole
my
time?
whole life.
How have I never heard of you? And,
yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you find out about bands right away, and other times it takes a while. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that like from here to Iowa City is such a far distance that the scene is so completely different, and there's so many bands over there that people haven't even heard of. Vice versa, even
Cedar Falls. My daughter is a sophomore at Cedar Falls UNI this year, and that scene's totally different than Fort Dodge or for Iowa City or whatever.
Yeah, it's just wild to think about that kind of stuff. I mean, you've got something very unique going here with your podcast as far as having it in the studio here, but you also play musical clips from people that either have some available or send them to you. I don't know if you're doing it here in the studio, if they're all going post-production on that.
Post-production on that.
Sweet. That is so cool.
I told you, I just get the fun
You
part.
get so
I've got a
awesome.
good team that works and helps me, so it's fantastic.
That is awesome. Having a team would help quite a bit.
Yeah. You're going all solo.
Oh, it's horrible.
I know.
No, it's not horrible. We talked about it before. I'm on a time crunch, and it's tough some weeks to get podcasts out and get them all edited perfectly the way you want them to.
I know.
And sometimes I just send them out how they sit, and sometimes
This is what you get.
Yep. And sometimes I edit them down if I have time, and that's another thing I keep thinking about is like your podcast and mine have parallels, but they're very different in what they do. Because I mean, the parallel is it's a podcast and we talk to people that are playing music or entertaining people. Those are the two parallels. Other than that, it's completely different.
The format's different, but the parallels are we both have the same interest.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's such a cool thing because we have only overlapped once ever with a guest and in a year, which is wild to think of that too.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. And that one was Alejandro Trevino, which was a great. And that's the other thing. Your interview with him was so much different than my interview with him. Completely different information.
I know.
That's the best part about this, and that's one reason I really dig your podcast. And
Thank you. I dig yours too.
It makes me wish that I guess I had known you before, so I could have enjoyed you playing music. More than I guess now you don't play as much or at all publicly anymore. But
we had a 10 years run with HipKnosis, 4 albums released, actually a 5th one with an EP. But there was just a time in my life where I kind of needed to figure out what I was going to do next,
Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah.
And I was so privileged to play with everybody. I played with Melvin James from Minneapolis, and he's been signed to a couple record labels. And then Kirk, of course, from the Hawks, and Dave from the Hawks, and John Passo. And I had so many people. Topher, Chris Anderson played with me for a while.
Okay.
Just the blessings over the years we had. We did create some good music. It was a time of raising my kids, getting them out the door. Now they're all on their own, so I'm coming back to doing the behind the scene thing now, and I'm really enjoying that. I do sit down at the piano and try to write a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'm still doing that, and
nice.
I get called for funerals and stuff and weddings for violin, but
sweet. Well,
it's not the rock and roll lifestyle you want to hear about, but
yeah, I know, but it's still really cool though, because I mean, as far as when you first said you played guitar or played violin, you were first chair violin in high school, and that made me think. I came from a high school where we didn't have violins in the band.
Right.
We didn't have an orchestra. We didn't have, I guess that would be the technical term.
Orchestra, yeah.
So like our whole deal was just wind instruments.
Yeah.
So we didn't have violins. There were people that played violin. As a matter of fact, my cousins play violin. And
do they?
They're pretty good too. I don't know if they play so much anymore, but I remember them being very good growing up. And that was one of those things that always kind of wowed me to think that like you're playing something completely different than any other instrument that anybody else is playing. Because I mean, like you grow up in school, you're in 5th grade, there's 100, 200 people in your class, like 60, 70% of them are going to be in band the first year. And it's like everybody's got an instrument in their hands, but none of them have strings.
It's a hard instrument, and it's fretless.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have those frets like a guitar. This is funny. As I thought, oh, cool, I'm branching out. I'm gonna be this rock star. I'm gonna buy myself a 3/4 Fender Squier bass, and I put it on, and I thought I could play it, but it's absolutely asinine. It's exactly backwards from a violin.
Oh yeah.
So G, D, A, E is on a violin, and it goes exactly backwards on a bass. So
okay.
It makes no sense to me. I donated that things to Chicks Who Rock in Des Moines.
Cool.
I was done. I'm like, nope, that's not my jam. So.
Well, I guess at least you gave it a try.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the weird thing, because I remember when I first started trying to pick up other stringed instruments, because I was like, well, if you can learn one, you could probably easily learn another one. But when I got to a mandolin, it was like the same concept, where the spacing was different for the one string to the next. And I, off the top of my head, can't remember what it is, but it's like this. It's almost like you got to build everything upside down from the ground up, if you're thinking about it in guitar terms. And it was different. It is different.
No, mandolin I can play because that is strung just like a violin.
There you go. So
yeah, so I've got these.
It was exactly like I thought it. It was exactly like you said it was.
Yeah, there's certain things I can do and a lot that I can't. So.
did you stop at like piano, violin? Do you have anything else that you like? Any tricks up your sleeve as far
Yeah,
as?
actually, I was in drumline in high school.
No way.
Yeah, I was. I played the small bass drum.
That's so crazy.
I carried that thing around, and I was so petite and so small that carrier would cut gouges into my legs. So they finally, Mr. Casti, Dan Casti, bless his heart,
Cassidy.
he was my band teacher. He finally goes, enough is enough. I'm putting you in charge of the cymbal line. So what I did is I played cymbals, and I choreographed all of the moves and all that, and we actually got a 1 at state drumline. So
Cool.
So percussion, and my dad was in music forever. I mean, I grew
nice.
up. My dad was in a band called Buckeye and played with a country band and Dale and the Devoneers. So I've been around music my whole life. Bless my mom's heart, she just passed last week, but
Sorry to hear that.
thank you. I got to tell you something now that we're on this subject, but you want to talk about music? Hospice told us with my mom, they go, music therapy helps. And you know what we did is we just held her hand, and dad and my sister and my daughter, we were just singing to her. And, she reacted to that. So every type of music really does move people. It was really beautiful to see. But I had recorded Amazing Grace with Melvin and Kirk and Dave Hearn and myself, and I played that for mom, and you could feel her reaction. So music is good for everybody.
Yeah, that reminds me of a video I saw online of a older gentleman with Alzheimer's, and they all of his buddies came to his house that used to be in his jazz band growing up, and they started playing like jazz tunes. And I mean, as Alzheimer's does, the guy looks like he's not paying attention to anything that's going on,
Right.
but he's got his hand on the piano and he's playing along with them. And so even though you can't tell, somewhere in his mind he's pulling all this stuff out and communicating with it, which is mind-blowing to me.
It is. It's so cool.
It's probably one of those things that I wish people would look into it more, find some way to tap into it. But like you said, music therapy, that is a thing.
Yeah, it really is.
There are people that actually have professions as music therapists and audio therapists and
It's
things
amazing.
like that.
It's really cool.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. Let's see. Going back to the music, we released one album called Cut Your Rainbow. The second album was HipKnosis. Third was Darkest Dreams. Fourth was Brand New Game. We had a video release in there somewhere, but after I told you I finished the music thing, I lived in California, and then I lived on the East Coast in Annapolis, Maryland, and then I moved back here, and that's when I started working for Fort Dodge Fine Arts.
Nice.
So
Yeah, that's one of our partners on the podcast.
I know. Shelly Botter's awesome.
Yes,
We've been friends for a decade or more, but she offered me the job. I handle calendar events, so anybody the good thing about being part of Fort Dodge, I can't even say it. Fort Dodge
Fine Arts.
Thank you.
Association. Yes.
I'm used to saying FDFA. That's
Yes.
why it was hard. But the beautiful part of that is if you're a member, I promote everything for you. I put it on 3 calendars a month. All your submissions, all the events on the calendars. I do Fort Dodge Fine Arts, Fort Dodge Growth Alliance, and then Iowa Tourism.
Nice.
So that's what I do on the side.
So you update all of the calendars on their website
Yeah.
then too? I was going to say, I've sent a couple people over to the calendar on the website because it's cool. I mean, there's stuff to do.
You know what? It's amazing. A lot of people don't think there's anything to do here, but if they get on those sites and look at the tools, there's always something going on.
I attempted to recreate exactly that because I saw, when it was one of those things where I was like, well, there's shows going on, there's plays going on, musicals, things of that, like all sorts of stuff that I would never even think about looking because it's not in my wing of Facebook or something like that. But because I found it's a nice tool, and I wanted to try and do something like that. So I made a Facebook group, and if you dump a Facebook event in there, if you go to the group on a computer, on the side it has a calendar link in the group, and you can click on the calendar and it does the same thing. It pulls up a calendar
does.
of all of the events that were posted in the group.
Well, we're gonna have to share some tricks here because I'm not sure I'm privy on that one. I don't know.
I would love to. I mean, I've just started digging into that stuff, and
that's great.
And that's something else I've debated because, like, as my podcast kind of grew, I kind of wanted people to like let out some of their secrets. Like, what is one of the things that you figured out that helped you a lot, that kind of got you to the next level that you think could help somebody else out? And like, one of the things I divvied out on a prior podcast was I go to when I'm talking to people, I say, oh, you got a Facebook, and sometimes I'll sit here with my phone and look at it and click on it and see, just scroll around just so I can see what kind of stuff is on your Facebook while we're talking.
Right.
And you go to the events page, and it's like, oh, we got shows this day, that day, and the other day, and you go to the event page, and there's nothing listed on their events on their Facebook page. It's like, oh, it's because whoever made the event didn't tag you in it as a co-host or something. But there's a way around that.
Okay.
And the way around that was, I talked about it. It's in the Uncle podcast, which I did with Liberty Ware and Jada Garcia a few episodes back. So if you want to listen to it, go back and listen to that.
I will for sure.
But I've debated even making like little videos and things like that and putting them up online. Like, this is how you would do this on Facebook if you want to help something. Like, I recently figured out how to like attach a tab on my Facebook page on a PC. You can see a YouTube tab on the side, and it just pulls all my YouTube videos right to my Facebook page for me.
Why don't we all just help each other figure this thing out?
Wouldn't it be cool?
Oh my gosh.
You know? And it's not like, I don't know. Maybe this is the way I look at it because it's a little bit different, because I didn't start playing music until I was like 30. You'd go to shows, and I'm already in there thinking like, I'm not going to make it rich, so I'm just doing this for fun.
Yeah.
But at the same rate, I also do notice that like you go places like down in Des Moines, and the scene there, like we were talking about, is very different than the scene up here. And I was talking to somebody who promotes shows up in the northern Iowa area, and they were like, it's weird that we can pay bands to come up here and draw enough people, and it works. But if you go down to Des Moines, the general gist is they don't pay bands very well because nobody shows up. Partially because there's 100 friggin' shows going on every night in Des Moines, so it's tough to figure out, like, are you going to go to the hockey game, the basketball game?
And supply versus demand. There's so much supply that the demand is not there.
It's basic economics is what it is.
Exactly.
And it's crazy that happens. So I don't know. I went into this thing thinking, I'm not going to make it rich, but it's exactly what we were talking about. I just wanted to kind of help other people and talk about what was going on as far as, like, for instance, you have a podcast, and it's one of those things where I didn't realize there was somebody else near my area doing kind of the same sort of thing I was doing. When I tuned in, I realized it was so much different, and it's your application of your knowledge of the subject versus mine, which, well, not versus, because we're actually out there helping each other do the same thing. I mean, your podcast is, we haven't even said the name of your podcast yet.
Indie Music Room with Heather Kelly.
It is available on Apple. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's on iTunes, everything.
Yep, I've seen it. I follow it on just about every platform I can get on.
Oh, thank you. I follow you too.
Because why not, rate and review. Got to do it. I mean, it's one of my favorite things about finding out who has things like this that help support other people. Like, what I don't know. I don't want to say, like, why do you do it, but, like, why? Like, what is the thing that drives you? Because for me, it was pretty much just like, oh, I could use this as an outlet to promote shows or do things like that. Even if it's for my own band, it was a nice promotional tool. And then after a while, it was just kind of like, that kind of went by the wayside. I just started talking to people about what they got going on instead of encasing the intro and outro with my garbage and putting the...
My reason was I wasn't performing anymore, but I wanted the connection with the music industry, and I wanted the connection with the artist, because I had so much fun in my 10 years with recording and the experiences I've had. And not just my experience, but, Kirk having the studio and my being out here 13 years, I've met so many cool artists. I'd come out here and, like, hang with the wives of the musicians for the day and make, bring out some food or, host of the most. But I just met some cool people. And I think that we all work so hard. And I think that we're needles in a haystack as musicians. It's really hard to get acknowledgement. And if I can help anybody get acknowledgement for their work, I'm in.
That's exactly what it is. It seems so weird because there aren't very many trades. It seems like any trade that involves anything artistic gets, like, sold down the river. Oh, that's 2019. Probably shouldn't say that. But it seems like everybody that has these artistic expressions kind of get the short sell on some of these things. For example, like, if I go play a show in Des Moines, I'm not going to get paid as much, and I just sit there and think, like, man, I just went down there and did something nobody else in this room can do, or anybody else in the town, because nobody else knows the songs that I'm playing, etc. Whether or not they like them, it's still my artistic expression. And you think about something kind of like that, and I mean, photographer is the same way. A lot of people that are visual artists, it's the same way. Like, you go to art. That's one of my craziest things. I don't go to very many art shows, but when I do, it's just like, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
How do you do that? That's only $50. Are you serious?
Yeah,
and it's,
for sure.
It's mind blowing, and
Yeah.
Everyone's it blows my mind that people can sit down and not recognize some of this talent that's going on out there. It seems that music's got a big rebound, though, going.
It does.
Maybe it's just the internet or me jumping into the scene a little bit to seeing it all happen, but it seems like even at Fort Dodge, it's just almost every night of the week you can pick a show to go to somewhere. It seems like
that's true. I know that Shiny Top has music on Thursdays.
Yeah, I almost want to say they did
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah.
They just started the Tuesdays as well.
Yeah.
And now I heard something about River Hop starting to do a jam or something on Thursdays too.
Cool.
So, I mean, there's always something going on.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the other cool thing was when you were talking about learning how to do improvisation.
Yeah.
There was jam nights. Patty's
Pub
had one for the longest time. Now, Patty's is no more. But the Junkyard in Barnum has one on Tuesday nights.
That's my cousin Eric's bar.
No kidding.
Just wanted to tell you that.
Nice.
Ashton's my second cousin. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
We go up there and sit down and just play a few sometimes for him just after dinner.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
They got all the gear there. I mean,
Yeah,
for the
and
most
Clint is always
part,
there.
Clint is always there. Clint Riedel, he's such a good guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So there are people out there that are doing things, and it's so weird that it seems like when I go out there, I'm like, have you ever heard of? Well, let me put it this way: I went to Timbuk Brew in Clarion to see Brutal Republic play.
Yeah.
And I'm usually kind of a barfly is not the word. Fly on the wall is the word.
Yeah, you like to watch, observe.
Yes, I like to be people adjacent, and that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah.
But I'll just sit there and just listen to people, and people are just like, "Who the hell are these guys? They're freaking awesome!" And it's like they're like 30 miles away.
How
tops.
do you not know Brutal Republic?
Exactly.
They're all over the place.
They've been here for 10 years doing this, or however long. It's been almost 10 years. They've been probably even longer. Jeremy's been playing music, you know. So, and it's just one of those things. I guess you just never know when you're going to show up somewhere, blow the doors off, or even play a show and have somebody enjoy what you're doing. And I feel like that's what makes all of that worth it. You know, I mean, as we were talking about before this, every now and then I'll go to a show and someone's like, "You're the podcast guy."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like neat. You know, it's humbling. It's also kind of weird because I'm so weird to have a podcast and like to talk to people.
Yeah.
But also go into public and
be acknowledged for it.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily the one to seek out conversation in public, but if somebody talks to me, I'll definitely do it. But it's also weird when somebody like has adulation for you. It's just like, whoa, I don't know how to handle this. It's almost like somebody walking up.
I'd be that girl that come in and say, "Hey, how you doing? My name's Heather Kelly." I'd be in your face, high-fiving. Give me a hug, pull it in.
That's actually what I was thinking about. It's like people verbally hugging you, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do here.
Oh, speaking of Jeremy, my eyes are watering. Speaking of Jeremy Ober, he was very sweet and had me play on his song 5 Nights violin.
Cool.
So another part of being out here at the studio is I've had the opportunity to record with so many people just by like, "Oh, you play violin?" Or, "Hey, can you sing these background parts?" Or, come up with the piano part. And it's just been intriguing. It's been intriguing to do it.
That's one of my favorite parts about art is that aspect, especially music, where it's like one person can't go out there and do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely not all at the same time. You can't play the drums and bass and guitar and sing your own backup vocals live and do it,
I know.
without a bunch of processing or something, or loopers or whatever. But that's such a cool thing that somebody else is out here and they find out that you might have something they can add to it.
Yeah.
Let's just toss it in and see how it sounds.
You can always throw it out.
Bingo! You can always toss it right back out. It doesn't matter who
Right.
it is, but that was kind of like what at a jam night. That's how that kind of felt. I learned how to do a little bit of improvisation. The Junkyard was the first jam night I played at because I was such a recluse. I was like, this seems like a nice place. And the first night I went out there was packed, and I was like, I'm not playing. Like, you bring gear? I'm like, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
And the next time I came out there, and it wasn't as packed. There were a lot of people there, but it was.
Oh, they got the regulars.
It was Jeremy that came up, and he was just like, I'm done playing. You're playing now. And it was like,
oh, here I go.
Okay, I guess,
This is me. Well, I'm going to have to catch one of your shows. I haven't been to one yet, but I'll do that for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, the punk band doesn't play up here very often. And the metal band I'm in just plays like festival type shows usually.
Okay.
So that's more or less just like a Midwest pseudo traveling band,
Yeah.
like once every couple of months show usually. But
That's kind of what HipKnosis did. We did more events and like opened up for national acts and maybe a few bars, but not really. We didn't get into the bar scene. didn't want to do the 9 to 1 because we were all original,
Mm-hmm.
and we only had enough material for 2 hours.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
So, and I'm not. Okay, I maybe have saying these boots are made for walking, but I'm not a big cover tune girl. You know what I mean?
Yep. You know-
So everything we did was original, and so we looked more for events and openers and things like that.
That makes a lot of sense though too, because it's such a weird thing to think about. If you go to a show at a bar, a lot of times there's one band the whole night playing like 4 hours, stacking
Right.
originals with covers, or just playing all covers. Very rarely can you find somebody that's making 4 hours worth of original music. That, and I'm not trying to be mean, but it's like that is like hit after hit after hit after hit after
That's
hit.
good.
After hit. You know,
Yeah.
if they could do that, they'd be making albums and touring the world.
Yes.
Not to say that there aren't people that can't make even around here 4 hours worth of music. Like I'm sure if people had the time to do it, there's a lot
Yeah.
of people around here that could pull it off. But it's such a tough, like it's a tall order for anybody. I'm in a punk band. We play a handful of punk covers. It's a little bit easier to toss punk covers in with punk music and kind of blend them than it is. We play like metal, but here's Leonard Skinner.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Exactly.
it's a little bit out of the element of what you've normally been playing. So I get exactly what you're saying as far as it's tough to want to play in the bar scene when you can't fill up the entire slot, because then your only other option is to invite other people there as far as bands, and it's a tough scene. It's tough to be on those shows. Sometimes bands are late. Sometimes you gotta, we're playing early now. We were
Or
supposed
they
to play late.
disrespect your equipment that you're previously set up, and
Yeah, I mean,
you know, all that stuff can go wrong. But it sounds like I'm trashing musicians, and I'm not. They're all, the ones I've worked with have all been great. But you know the struggles as trying to be an original independent musician.
yeah,
Very difficult.
yeah, and it's like you said. Everywhere I've played has always cut me a fair deal. I mean, we talked about not getting paid as much in Des Moines usually as you would get paid in a smaller town, but we talked about how that's based on economics. Every time I'm in Des Moines, the deal we agreed on has always been what we call on both sides a fair deal to everybody, and they pay it all. They always pay it out. I've never not been paid at a show.
Yeah.
So, and that's another thing I want to say. I've never not been paid what everybody has agreed to get paid, ever, like at a show. So that's like this weird silver lining that I haven't had to deal with yet.
That's
Going
awesome.
somewhere and getting screwed over, but like at the same rate, everybody's got each other's backs. The places that want to have bands play and want to have original music in them are going to be nice to the original bands that come in, and everyone's going to do their best to be as respectful to everyone else as they can. It always seems to work out pretty well 99% of the time, which is something else I always thought was pretty odd, because I mean, it's slightly competitive, but also like at the same time, like not competitive at all. You know what I mean?
I never felt, quote, in competition. I just felt, is anyone going to come see us? Who's going to be here? No, I never, like, I opened up Bonnie Finken in Des Moines. I mean, I had her open up for us. I played with Stella and Dirty Little Rabbits.
Cool.
Sean Cran's band.
Mm-hmm.
Just a Ray Faring. I mean, a lot of and I kind of stuck with the chicks. I wanted to kind of make it like chick shows. So since I was the lead singer, I would try to find these other girls, and we started doing double shows, and that was fun because then we shared the stage, and we both got to do our original stuff without running, out of material, etc. But
That's really awesome.
yeah, I had a lot of fun.
That is also like one of the benefits, though. If somebody wants 4 hours and you can do 2, and finding one of the bands to buddy up with every now and then.
Yeah.
I feel like every band's got about 5 on the hook that they're like, these are our buddies, and we know we can lean on them if we need somebody at a show. That we can be like, hey, come play the show with us,
dude. I need you now.
Yep, and they'll
yeah,
they'll do it if they can, and it's really cool to
Absolutely.
have those people to lean on in the music community. Like it's so weird to think that, I don't know. I guess I never think too much about it, but it's so weird to think about if like somebody could be a fan of the band you're in.
Yeah.
Like, even if they're your peer, which is something crazy that I guess I don't really think too much of coming inward towards me, because I have so much of it going outward.
Yeah.
Like, I always point at these guys, but the first time I saw TV Cop when they were sports team, I was just like, what the heck is going on? These guys are so cool, and you're just high-fiving them all the time, and then every show they go that's anywhere nearby, you're like, what's up, dudes? Like, let's go out to eat or something,
Yeah.
And you're just buddies with them, and every show that we can play together, we try to, and it's been a while, so maybe we should play a show with TV Cop sometime.
I think you should.
Oh, man.
Sounds like a great idea.
Is there any of your HipKnosis stuff available online anywhere? Is it on? I mean, like Spotify, Bandcamp? Can people purchase it at least?
Oh
if it's
yeah,
somewhere?
for sure. I released all 4 albums digitally and physically. Digitally, CD Baby changed things up. So you
Okay.
used to have to pay $19.99 a year for,
Mm-hmm.
or for, excuse me, $49.99 a year for an album. But the last 2, the most recent ones, Brand New Game and oh my gosh, I can't even remember the names of my own albums. That's so
Oh
sad.
no.
That's how long it's been. But anyways, my last 2 albums are still up digitally, and then I've got physical copies. You can always contact the studio, if you want those, mail them out. And you can order physical copies through CD Baby too. They have the
Oh, yeah.
inventory. So
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's cool.
yeah. But if you go to YouTube or whatever, you can see our whole Heather Kelly. It's under Heather Kelly topic. You can see our inventory of songs and
Nice.
a couple videos in there. I looked a lot younger, but yeah.
Didn't we all? I don't even want to think about. I was talking with
How
somebody.
old are you?
I'm 32.
Hush, little baby, don't you cry. No.
Oh my gosh. No, I was actually talking with somebody I went to school with recently about this, about how it's just like, man, I see so much of myself in you because I went back to school at like 28. So
Yeah.
I got to see like kids at 18. So I was like, I see so much of me in you when I was your age. Like, just give it 10 years, you'll calm down. Everything will be fine. Like, they're just freaking out about stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's cool. Like, oh man.
I hit 44 this year. That was monumental. I'm like, no, 44, but I don't feel 44.
You don't act 44.
I don't look 44.
True that. True that. The picture that we will have promoting in the podcast will have no filter and it will look amazing.
Oh, that's
Just
funny.
want everybody to know that.
Yeah.
No, and that's the other thing. Like in music, age doesn't really mean anything. If anything, I've found that the older you are, the better you are. Almost always. It seems like you get these old farmer dudes. It's like, oh, he's been playing fiddle for 60 years out on a farm, like in the middle of nowhere. Of course, he's gonna be sick good, Like,
Yeah.
And then you go to these jam nights, and it's like, oh, it's just all these like dudes, like old dads, but they're just like killing it out there, never missing notes, shredding it up, and it's wild to see. Like, especially being like like 30-ish, but I started watching music when I was like 18. I go to live
Sure.
shows, and it's like, dude, these guys are killing it. Like, where are you guys hanging out at? It's like, I work in a factory. Like, what? How
Yeah.
did that happen?
I have a funny story about age, real quick. I think I started recording here when I was 30. And the first record we released, we sent to Clive Davis.
All right.
And we had a couple drinks that night, and we had an old computer out here, and he's like, let's send out our first big, here's our first album. And I'll be goddamned if Victor Murgatroyd, Clive Davis's right hand, didn't get back to us next day.
No way.
Kirk woke me up in bed. I sat straight up in bed, and I'm like, oh my God, thinking it's great. And then Kirk, sorry. I had to call back Victor Murgatroyd that day, and Kirk goes, don't tell him you're 30. I mean, it was like so funny. Don't tell him you're 30. It just was hilarious. And I'm like, if I was over the hill then, what am I now? But,
Don't, because I don't know. I guess if you're I never know who's listening to these podcasts. Some people come in
Yeah.
out of the dark and they have no clue music references from one thing for the next.
Right.
Obviously, they're looking for the next big thing, the youngest person they can find to mold into the future and make as much money off them as they possibly can.
Yes.
So the whole gist was, don't tell them how old you are.
Yeah.
Because and honestly, you really don't look 44 like at all.
No.
So like,
I got a baby face, but clothes help.
that's why I wear a lot of them. I cover up as much of myself as possible
Yeah.
when I go to public.
I do too. So
Let's see here. How much time we got on this thing so
I don't
far?
know.
Got 40 minutes in already. This is longer than one of your podcasts usually.
I know you're freaking me out. I'm like getting dry throat here. I'm sweet, in and out, done, boom, music, everything.
And that's, I don't know, that's one of the things about this podcast is for the longest time I try to keep everything as music-based as possible and always only talk about music. And then sometimes I found myself getting into gear talk with people, which I found out is like an instant turnoff for most listeners. They're just like, I don't know what.
No, because they don't know.
Tube screamers and and it's just nonsense to people. I don't, and it's I get it. It makes sense, but
It's over my head, so you're turning me off. No, I'm just kidding.
No. But it is one of those weird things to think about, like who gets to hear this, because I try to go into these things as well prepared as I can, but I also want to leave everything as open conversationally as I can.
Organic.
Because I feel like those are the best, because I've come in with some where it's just like people almost have like loaded up questions for you to ask them during the interview.
It's sterile sometimes.
It feels like that a little bit, and that's probably one of my favorite parts about having some dry moments in the podcast where you're just like, where are we going to take this next? And do you ever have anything like that, or do you take most of that kind of stuff out in post-production when you do a podcast? Or is there any of that? Or do you just have like a bomb-ass 30-minute conversation and then just hit the lights and you're done?
Well, you've got to remember I've only done this 7 months.
Yes.
So in the beginning, there was a lot of, stop, start again. But I guess I got more comfortable with it, so it's more of an easy conversation like we're having tonight. I got all my intros and outros done, so I no longer have to do those, which is great. To me, it's just a conversation with people.
Yep.
Just like we're having. I mean, it's super easy.
Yeah, it is pretty nice. Your podcast does a lot more highlighting of the musician themselves, their art they put out, things like that. And mine is kind of more on the just who are you and what do you got going on kind of line, which is a little bit weird to think about, because it makes me think, comes back to like how many people are listening from what backgrounds. Because it's so crazy. I've got people young and old, male, female, I got people from Europe that listen to this thing for some reason.
Fantastic.
So hello, whoever's listening from Dublin, Ireland, every
Hi,
single
Dublin.
week.
I'm Irish.
I love you. It's great, and it's kind of wild to think about that. Did you ever think that your podcast? I mean, do you have the availability to check on your stats or to see how many listens and
yeah,
things like
Bill
that?
sends me updates every week.
Cool.
We're
That's
in
awesome.
182 countries right now.
Dude, that's wicked.
I don't know how he does it. He is a master. He was in radio for years. So and also like master website, knows how to get everything at the top of Google, like all those aggregators. And he's really good at that. Again, I just get the fun part. I do. I really do.
That's awesome. And that's really cool to have somebody like that on your side that is willing to help out, or at least sees the value in this. It's not that I'm doing this alone and like wanted to do it alone and I'm going to do it alone forever. But it was definitely one of those things where I didn't know what I was doing when I first started out. You can definitely tell my first 10 podcasts, the audio is horrible compared to the latter ones, and even then there's a few when people listen to them, it's like, that's this person's podcast, because I can tell how it's mixed differently because I was still testing stuff out.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do almost any of that work. Do you think that is a benefit or a hindrance?
I think I'm spoiled. No, I mean, in this studio, I've recorded for several years, been here 13 years, but I can run the gear in here. When I do an interview, Kirk does sit in here and engineers it for me. So I'm telling you, I'm spoiled.
Cool. That's so cool.
He handles all the volume and all the glitches. And I'm looking at you and I want to say, I'm so sorry, I love you. Because I know all the work that goes behind it.
Yeah.
And I have a team and you're just doing it on your own. So I want to thank you for...
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, this shouldn't be just us high-fiving each other the whole time.
High five!
It kind of is. But, that's kind of the fun of it, though, too, is trying to find a guest every single week, finding out how many people I actually know, how many people who actually don't want to talk is another crazy one. I've had so many people tell me no. And I get it, too. 'Cause, especially if you're not in the loop, like, what's a podcast? I don't want to be on that thing or whatever. And then it's like... something and the other end of it's just weird, like doing promotional things online, posting stuff in different groups on Facebook and stuff. And I mean, the weirdest thing I think that's ever happened was somebody accusing me of profiting off of other musicians' hard work.
I saw all that business.
It was such a weird situation, and it worked itself out really well because they just didn't know.
Right.
But that's probably like the weirdest thing that's happened to me, and I've run into it a few times, but that was definitely the most public like anything had ever happened.
And you're sitting here thinking, I'm just trying to do what's right.
Exactly.
And you're getting your ass kicked.
The craziest part about it was well, one of the people that came to my defense in the whole situation, or at least talked to me about it a little bit, was Justin Comer from I Hear I See, the podcast. It's a radio show in Iowa City.
Yeah,
It's also a podcast. He does a great job. He's got a 100th show coming up. It's
awesome.
This will come out Thursday. His 100th show is coming up this weekend. So check it out. I Hear I See. I want to make sure I get that out there because he's awesome. He's been doing 100 shows. That's insane.
That's insane.
But yeah, he was like, it's so weird that like if you go to your Facebook page, you can see like none of this exists. And then like the whole thing that got people kind of up in a tizzy was I was looking to aggregate a like MTV like YouTube channel,
sure,
like a playlist that could have everybody's music on it from all across Iowa, all different genres. I don't care what it was. Send me your music videos, official music videos only, no live videos, please. But you know, I don't even play music on my podcast. The only music that's on here is like a tiny snippet of a Three Finger Betty jam at the end of one of our nights. That's all I play. It's the intro and outro music. That's where it came from if you're looking for it. But but it's so weird because like you play music on your podcast, which I think is one of the coolest things about yours. And almost every music podcast that's out there does that. And it's not like I'm not doing it just to be different, I guess.
Right.
You and I discussed a little bit. I don't know the best way to go about doing it correctly to make sure that whatever happens monetarily goes to the correct people. I don't profit off of my podcast, but I do have an advertiser at the beginning usually, and I do draw not monetary value out of that, but I do draw some value out of having that advertiser at the beginning. So I don't want people to think that I'm coming out here and just like put this person on my podcast so I can get all their listens and then stacking their music on there and play it for free. It's
not like that at all.
It was such a weird thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever run across anything not quite like that, but like anything kind of odd like that in the scene where you're just like, whoa, what happened here? This didn't quite seem to go the way I thought it was going to. I thought we were all kind of on the same team here, but...
Oh, well, not so much with the podcast, but during HipKnosis I sure did. You know what I mean?
Do you have any like general examples that that you won't be able to?
Oh, it's all behind us, so we can laugh about it now. But the last album, Hearn wrote a song called "Set Me Free," and Melvin's more rock and Dave's more 80s. But we ended up nobody could get along. Nobody could accept what mix was going to be put out. Mm-hmm. So I put out Set Me Free 1 and Set Me Free Remix because I had to shut them up. But that's what like broke the band up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, God damn it, guys. Why can't we just get along?
You know, that's a weird thing, though.
It happens.
Because there has to be this give and take, especially going into a studio where like Three Finger Betty is in and out of making a new album. We've got all the stuff recorded. We're trying to mix it the correct way that we want to. And that's exactly like you said. You're running into issues with how it's mixed. People in the band might not agree with certain things. There's some things in the album that I've found that I didn't care for as much, but at the same rate, everybody else loved them. So it's just like, I'm outnumbered. I'm just going to let it go. Because it's not, you know.
Well, that was the problem is some of us couldn't let it go.
Oh, I mean.
But you know what? We all love each other. We're all still great friends. We created great music, and it was a good time.
Exactly. Like the biggest thing I have for at least Three Finger Betty, or at least any of the music I play, I'm not so much like a composer of music as I am just like a performer of music. I don't write any of the Three Finger Betty stuff almost at all. Like John does literally all the verbiage, and he writes the song structure, and we just fill in all the gaps because he can't play everything.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
You know, and so obviously without me there, it would sound different. But at the same rate, I'm not the one swinging the hammer on the rocks here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if anybody else in the band putting in the real work, especially people that have been playing in bands so much longer than me, I'm gonna let them have a green light probably.
Yeah.
And some of that's just the whole fact that I'm trying to figure out my place still in the music scene. And that's one reason I started this podcast, because it was like, why didn't anybody have a podcast about this yet? You know, and then you start one, you're like, oh, there's people with podcasts about this. You know, radio shows turned into podcasts and things like that.
Yeah.
Is your podcast, I know it's available online pretty much anywhere, but you can go to Fort Dodge, was it Fort Dodge Radio?
Yeah, FortDodgeRadio.com.
Is your podcast available like on their radio station? Because you can tune into a station there.
It is. It's played at certain times.
Okay.
Yeah, it's played. Anybody that I interview, it's played 8 times that month.
Okay.
It's played Friday, Saturday, at different times. One is an evening show, one's a daytime show for people, different
Yep.
demographics.
Perfect.
And so one interview gets you eight times a month and in all those different countries. So it's going good.
Yeah, it's really cool. I've actually at work a couple times just tuned into the radio station just to see what was on,
Yeah.
because it is kind of fun to have an internet radio station. I interviewed one internet radio station DJ. It was Bob Minter. He's out of like Belmonte-ish area, maybe somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over this way.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not used to the directions in this building.
No, I
But-
know.
But yeah, he has an awesome radio station, Code Zero Radio. It's really kind of, that's just the other cool thing is how does somebody start an internet radio station like just from scratch, especially in Fort Dodge? It's just mind blowing to me that's a thing and it's happening and it's real.
Yeah. Well, again, that has a lot to do with Bill Grady. He had 20 plus years experience in radio, actually general management and everything. And this was a vision of his. And until he got it up and running, and then we had a meeting and he presented this opportunity, I was like, bingo, Yahtzee, I'll do it. I love to talk. I can do that. So
That's really cool. Do you have any HipKnosis stuff like Facebook? Is any of that stuff still running or did you ever have one? Or
yeah. We've got an official website. It's
Nice.
www.hypnosis.com. Of course, Facebook, and you can find CD Baby, iTunes. Oh my gosh, MySpace.
Oh, sweet.
2006 or something. But I mean, no, all that stuff's up there.
Sweet.
And a lot of the reasons people couldn't find us is the spelling, the HIPKNOSA.
Yep.
Well, there's two reasons. Heather Kelly,
Okay.
H and K,
Yep.
and then Heather and Kirk. Because when
Okay.
we first started, our first band was called H and K, featuring Heather Kelly.
Okay.
So that's just kind of how it came up. And my dad owned a sign shop, so we worked on logos and we made T-shirts and
Cool. That's
and
awesome.
bumper stickers, and we did the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah.
I'm no foreigner to the stickers thing. That's like one of my favorite promotional tools. I huck stickers out left and right.
I saw those at the gallery today too.
I make it rain. I need to go drop some more off down there.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you're ever, on the Instagram, I post pictures of where I hide stickers at locations. so
I am
people
not
don't
on the
scam
gram
them.
yet. I've never. I'll think about it.
It's whatever. The only reason I got on Instagram was for bands and podcasts.
Promoting.
I don't have a personal one, and people, you need to get one. I don't know. Just hit me up at Audible Farm.
I know
It's
exactly.
the best I got. I'm on everything else. If
You're everywhere.
that gets to be a little bit of a drag. Do you do your own promoting, or does Fort Dodge Radio do all the promote?
I promote my own shows.
Mhm.
He promotes his radio. I promote my own shows.
All right.
So if you go to his website, you'll see shows like whatever, and then you click on it. It's the Indie Music Room with Heather Kelly, and then you can find every episode there.
Yep.
And then what I do is I basically just share and post all those once he gets them past post production.
Mm-hmm.
Just share them with everybody.
That's
so.
really cool.
Yeah.
And it's kind of also wild that you do have a pretty big following on Facebook, if I recall correctly. My phone's not with me, otherwise I'd
That's
double
okay.
check it. But I want to say that our numbers are pretty comparable, which is pretty wild. Do you think that like two small town people can have such high listen
I
rates
know.
and high numbers for a podcast? And that's just to say I'd love to. I wish there was a way for all of us to sit down with like the same, because I know of at least 6 podcasts in Iowa that are doing something adjacent to what we're doing, at least a little bit.
Wouldn't it be cool to have like a brainstorm session?
Yeah, just have us all sit down. I actually, PodcastIA was what it was called. It's still a thing. It's not as active as it used to be, but last year they had a meeting, and a whole bunch of podcasters from all over Iowa got together and talked about what we were doing and how to do it better.
Well, keep me posted. I'd be interested if you hear something about that. so.
There's another one called the Iowa Podcast Network, but once again, it's not as active as it used to be. But it's still a thing.
Right.
So, excuse me, geez.
Sure.
But those are options. If you go to audiblefarm.com, scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find
links on it,
link
yeah.
to both of those, as well as a link to your podcast. Because
I saw that.
'cause I
Thank
enjoy
you.
that. Yeah, and I gotta say thanks for putting a little link to mine on yours as well.
You
'cause
got it.
It's one of those things. While we're out there supporting all these musicians, we might as well support each other, supporting the musicians.
I agree.
And that's one of the most beautiful things I think that our scene has going for it. I get a lot of exposure to the Fort Dodge and Des Moines scenes, not so much anywhere else, but the Des Moines scene's got pockets of really great people that support each other.
Right.
And I feel like if they could just all lock arms, it could be an unstoppable force down there. It's kind of happening up here in Fort Dodge. You'll go to jam nights where it's some dude playing an acoustic guitar and there's a guy that only plays metal and he's up there hanging out having a great time because everybody just loves everybody. You know? And it's
good. It's good stuff.
It's pretty wild. I haven't heard too many people up and around the area that have said almost anything bad ever about anyone ever, and which is pretty wild, especially in the music scene, because some of us and that's the thing. Music's so subjective that you can have an opinion on it, which draws a lot of people having bad opinions and letting them out, which is something I try my best not to do, having an hour-long weekly podcast, which is insane. But I feel like I've done a pretty good job, and I feel like everyone that's been on the podcast has done a pretty good job about it.
I've liked everything I've heard. It's all positive. It's all good stuff.
It's supposed to be. Sometimes I joke around that I'm like, oh no, is somebody going to take that way out of context and be super mean about it or what? But
well, it's if they do, that's in their own brain because
I guess that's just something I listen to tons of podcasts. Mostly it's comedy podcasts. So I hear a lot about.
What's your favorite comedy podcast?
Oh my gosh. I listened to Bill Burr's new podcast today.
Yep.
Bill Burr's podcast is probably one of my favorite because it's just him in a room talking about stuff and I just imagine him sitting in a tiny closet just yelling, just pacing back and forth, just sweating and yelling a bunch.
Funny.
If you haven't checked it out, that's a good one. I did a podcast with a gal that has a podcast in Iowa, and it's called Welcome to My Show. That was a fun one to listen to for a long time. She does all sorts of crazy stuff on there. Michelle Guild, that was that interview. That was a really good one as far as Iowa podcasts go. I do listen to a lot of I don't want to out all of my comedy tastes because people might start to pigeonhole me a little bit, but that's one reason I try and generalize as much as possible.
Yeah, you're good at that.
I don't know. I definitely swing into adult-themed podcasts, people that have vulgar terminology, because I think it's funny. When you're driving on the road and somebody says swear words, for some reason it just makes me laugh. So I do listen to a lot of Joe Rogan as well. I mean, everybody listens to Rogan or hates him, whatever. Yeah. But it's kind of cool when you can have a guy that's a comedian that talks to other comedians and you can laugh super hard, and then Neil deGrasse Tyson's on the next week and you're like, dude, this guy's wicked smart, and he had a mycologist on there recently. That was a good one. And it's so weird to think that I listen to those types of podcasts, which are kind of interviewee-ish, but at the same rate, like, how do I go from listening mostly to comedy podcasts to starting a talking podcast, Did you ever see yourself maybe starting a podcast before the opportunity was dropped in your lap?
Hell no.
No?
No. You and I both know I'm a good talker, but I didn't know that I could put it to use. But it just came up, and I needed something to do. With my mom was failing, and I was her caretaker for 11 years. So I knew that after this came, I was going to have something to focus on, and I've enjoyed building it up so far. So
yeah, you've done a great job.
Thanks.
You got a great team around you. Your voice sounds great. That's another thing that I think is crazy. I need to drink some water or something. I'm going to cough again.
Yeah, all right.
But like, I oftentimes think like, oh man, does my voice sound weird on the radio? And then you like start to mix your own stuff and you're like, gross. Like,
I know.
It sounds so bad. Put it through a filter or something.
I know.
But like, I mean, yours sounds great. It sounds like you've been doing radio before. Have you ever done any radio, like emceeing of any things like that?
I've never emceed. I've been interviewed, with the HipKnosis and such, but no, it's just my voice. I don't know.
Well, I think you're doing a great job doing what you're doing.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure we're getting close. Oh, look at 59 minutes.
How about that?
Which is usually about what I try and shoot for in case I need to edit some goodies out, which this one will require zero editing.
I hope not.
This is a good one. This is a really good one. Shoot me some links. I'll drop them all down below for everybody that didn't have a pen and paper.
I will do that.
So that way, if you're listening and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot to write down the links, just scroll down. They're down below.
I'll give them to you.
All the HipKnosis goodies, links to your podcast.
Awesome.
I'll take it all, and
Thank you.
I'd love to share it because I don't know. Like I said, if people like us could just lock arms and do the thing we're doing and just be like, if you like what I'm doing, check out what they're doing.
That's how I feel.
That's all it takes, you know, and let the people that want to listen.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come to the studio today and spend an hour with me. I know you're a busy guy.
Thank you. Somebody told me once, busy people don't say they're busy, and I think I said that on a recent podcast, but that's how I feel sometimes. It's like, I am pretty busy, but I also kind of just want to suck it up and keep going.
I know you do. Well, again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Heather.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Oh, that one was so cool. It's kind of a weird thing. I talk about it in a lot of the outros, but a lot of these people I'm talking with, it's about a 50-50 shot whether or not I've actually met these people before. And the extent of me and Heather Kelly meeting each other was literally nothing more than a phone call a handful of weeks prior. Other than listening to her podcast on a monthly basis, she usually puts out about one a month or so. And I love checking them out. Like I said, we've only overlapped once ever, and that was with Alejandro Trevino. So if you guys want to get a look into the music scene in Northern Iowa, and I don't have enough content for you, check out the Indie Music Room with Heather Kelly. I highly suggest it. It's available everywhere. You can even check it out online at FortDodgeRadio.com. It's a pretty cool thing. You know what? I didn't know anybody else was even doing this, and then I found out that we started podcasts pretty close to the same time, and hers has really taken off. We discussed stats and things like that in the podcast here, but I highly suggest it. There's a link down below where you can find a link to FortDodgeRadio.com and her little page on there, and it's really awesome. All the episodes are there. It's available on Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeart. I mean, it is everywhere. So check it out. There's even an RSS feed there. If you want to listen to the radio station, you can listen to FortDodgeRadio.com, the internet radio station, and the podcast even plays on there. So that's really, really sweet. Check it out. I got links to that as well as tons of links to HipKnosis stuff. So if you want to check out her material from her time in HipKnosis, go down below, check it out. I've got Reverb Nation, CD Baby. You can buy the songs. You can buy physical copies off CD Baby as well. Facebook pages, the whole 9 yards. Check it out. I got it all down below. I just want to say super huge thanks to Heather Kelly for letting me swing out to Junior's Motel and do a podcast with her. I know it's probably a little weird sitting on the other end of the microphone while somebody else is doing the interviewing, but thanks, Heather. I really appreciate it. I also want to say, it's just really cool to get out to Junior's Motel. If you've never heard of it, check it out online. Junior's Motel near Otho, the Fort Dodge Otho area. Sweet recording studio. It's all analog, which if that intrigues you, maybe swing back a couple episodes and check out the Travis Atkinson episode. He does a lot of analog recording stuff too, and it's something that's not super common, but within like 4 or 5 episodes I had a couple people that have ties to an analog studio on my podcast. So that's pretty wild as far as I'm concerned. So check that out. There's all sorts of good links down below, as well as links to www.audiblefarm.com. You can go there. You can listen to all of the podcasts that I have. They're available in a couple different playlists, whether or not you want to listen to it from SoundCloud or YouTube. Both playlists are there, available on the website, as well as links to everything. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. I got links to everything on there. It is what it is, man. It's a really cool thing that I guess I never really thought I'd have my own website. I was leaned on the Iowa Podcast Network to do a lot of my work for me, and now I've got my own website. So you can go there, check it out. You can find out where you can listen to the Audible Farm podcast. You can also find all our social media and things on there. There's a nice little smattering of social media stuff. Some of our Instagram feed is on there, as well as our podcast shirt. Yeah, that's right. We've got a few podcast shirts available still, so if you want to check that out, go there. Otherwise, Heather Kelly and I with the Indie Music Room, we've kind of partnered up a little bit. At the bottom of the page, you can find a partners section, and there's a link to Heather Kelly's podcast right there. So if you go to audiblefarm.com, you can also find a link to Heather Kelly's podcast, the Indie Music Room. highly suggest you guys check that one out. Very well produced podcast. You can even listen to the tunes of the bands that the people she's interviewing, some of their old tunes, new tunes, just things they got going on. It's wicked. It's wicked cool. Highly suggest everybody check it out. If you like this podcast, guarantee you'll like that one. So go ahead and like, click, rate, review, subscribe, poke, whatever you got to do. Do all the good stuff. Support indie music in your area. I'm going to try my best in the next year to maybe help out some of these other podcasts. I know mine is not the biggest and it's not the most popular, but I also feel like some of these people need to have some light shown on them because I'm not the only one out there doing exactly what I'm doing. There's a lot of us doing our best to support the indie music scene in Iowa and beyond any way we can, and I really just want to thank each and every one of you for listening, and every single one of my guests for joining me on the podcast, whether or not it was a remote interview or a Skype interview, or whether or not anybody came to my little mini studio here and did a little recording with me in the mini studio. I just want to say thank you to every single person. Thank you guys for listening. The hospitality, the kindness, the niceness has been insanely. It outweighs the bad by 1,000,000 to 1. It's so cool. Just thanks everybody. I really appreciate you guys supporting the podcast, loving on it. So go to audiblefarm.com, check out all the links. Make sure you scroll down in the description section of this podcast and check out everything Heather Kelly has to offer. It's totally cool. Check out the Indie Music Room. I am going to make another pot of Couchtown coffee, and then I got some work to do. So I will check you guys all next week. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Peace.